there's a mountain in Tibet that almost feels too perfect to be real. This is Mount Kailash, and it rises with sharp edges and clean lines, like it was crafted with intent. People call it sacred, untouchable, even forbidden. And now, new findings are making the mountain's mystery even bigger. Patterns have been spotted that look less like nature and more like design. Instruments are picking up strange disturbances at its base. And when researchers started comparing maps, they noticed something jaw-dropping. Kailash lines up with other ancient sites thousands of miles away. That's why some people say the latest discovery shouldn't even exist, at least not inside a mountain that's supposed to be natural. The deeper you look, the less Kailash feels like geology, and the more it feels like a secret we weren't meant to stumble across. Most mountains test your strength and endurance. Everest, K2, and Annapurna all push climbers to their limits, with cliffs, avalanches, and brutal weather. But Mount Kailash is different. People who have gone there say it is not just the physical climb that stops you. Something else seems to push back, something no rope, gear, or training can prepare you for. One of the earliest voices to say this out loud was British mountaineer Hugh Rutledge. Back in 1926, he visited the area, studied the peak, and flat out called it utterly unclimbable. This wasn't a man who scared easily. He had years of experience on tough peaks, yet something about Kailash convinced him it could not be conquered. And decades later, even with modern equipment and better planning, the story stayed the same. In 2001, a group of Spanish climbers was permitted. That in itself was rare because the mountain is sacred, and most groups are turned away before they even get close. But the strange part is, just before their climb was about to begin, the team suddenly abandoned the mission. Reports said they were hit by hallucinations, sudden sickness, and a deep, unshakable fear. These were trained mountaineers, yet something happened that made them back away before they even touched the mountain. This isn't the only story. A few expeditions pushed their luck further, and the outcome was even more disturbing. 4 members of a scientific team who had thought about climbing were warned by a Tibetan Lama to leave the mountain alone. They listened, stepped back, and went home. But within a year or two, all 4 of them were dead. That is the kind of thing that makes people believe Mount Kailash itself does not allow intruders. Russian climber Sergei Chistyakov told his own version of this feeling. As he got closer to the mountain, he noticed the usual problems you expect at high altitude. Headaches, trouble breathing, cramps. Nothing unusual so far. But what he felt in his mind was different. His heart was racing, and he said the thought kept drilling into his head that he did not belong there. He said the only time he felt free again was when he turned around and started walking down. He described it like the mountain was rejecting him, and in a strange way, he felt grateful to leave. Then there are the accounts that go beyond fear or exhaustion. In 1999, a Russian scientific expedition led by Professor Ernst Muldashev studied the mountain and collected some very odd reports. They claimed that the time around Mount Kailash did not act normally. Siberian mountaineers who went near the peak came back with hair that had turned grey in days, nails and beards that had grown overnight, and faces that looked years older. Think about how long it takes to grow your nails. Usually 2 weeks or more. Near Kailash, some locals said it happened in half a day. Beards that should have taken weeks were suddenly long after only hours. Wrinkles showed up on the faces of people who had looked healthy before the climb. And some of these people, the ones who came back with the most extreme changes, didn't live long. They aged fast and died young, as if time itself had punished them. And if rapid aging isn't strange enough, there are the stories of people who simply vanished. For centuries, Tibetan warnings have said no human should step on top of Mount Kailash. The prophecy is blunt. It says anyone who dares to reach the summit and look upon the faces of the gods will die. And for many, the mountain has lived up to that warning. Pilgrims who walk the sacred path around the base, called the Chakra, sometimes disappear and are never seen again. Not because they slipped or were buried in snow, but because no trace of them was ever found. The stories about Mount Kailash don't stop at people vanishing without a trace or feeling rejected by the mountain. What makes it even stranger is how machines, compasses, and even planes seem to act up whenever they get too close. Trekkers and pilgrims have often said their compasses go wild on the slopes. The needle that should point north starts spinning in circles, sometimes pointing in completely random directions. A compass is one of the most basic tools in the mountains, but near Kailash it might as well be a toy. Even the skies above Mount Kailash tell a similar story. Pilots have long said that planes cannot pass directly over the peak. Drones too stop working or crash when flown nearby. Officially, the region is treated as a no-fly zone. There are plenty of tall mountains in the world, yet this one has air traffic kept away. Not because of its height, but because the instruments go haywire. Also, climbers who have tried to push higher say storms appear out of nowhere, almost as if the mountain itself decides when to shut them down. Colonel R.C. Wilson, a British mountaineer who joined one of the early expeditions to Everest in the 1920s, gave one of the first written accounts of this. He believed he had found a direct route up the southeast ridge, and his Sherpa guide assured him the ridge could be climbed. Wilson later recalled that just as he thought he had discovered an easy walk to the summit, heavy snow began to fall and made the ascent impossible. Modern climbers have also said the same thing. They say one moment the weather is calm, and the next they are blinded by snowstorms or swallowed by thick clouds. Whiteouts can get so bad that even very experienced climbers lose their sense of direction in just a few minutes. And then you have the inner battles. Sergei Chistyakov, the Russian climber who spoke about being rejected by the mountain, explained that it was not just his body failing him, it was something in his head. He said his heart was pounding and he felt completely out of place, like he had no right to be there. Other climbers have described similar feelings. They say it is like being trapped in a loop with their own fears, unable to think straight, even though they know they are physically capable of going further. These sudden waves of dread, mixed with storms and disorientation, convince them to retreat. Some people call it psychological, others call it spiritual. But whatever it is, it has the same result. Nobody makes it to the summit. Firstly, the mountain keeps people from the top, and the lakes at its base seem to play by their own rules too. On the surface, they look like ordinary lakes, but pilgrims and travellers will tell you right away that there is nothing ordinary about them. The first one is Mansarovar. The name translates to the invincible lake, and its blue water is known for staying calm most of the time. Pilgrims say even when the wind picks up, Mansarovar hardly ripples. Even though the lake sits at a brutally high altitude where most bodies of water freeze solid, Mansarovar never fully freezes. You would expect ice thick enough to walk on, but no, this lake seems to quietly resist the rules of nature. Now, right next to it, just a thin strip of land away, is Rakshastal. This lake has a very different personality. Where Mansarovar feels calm and welcoming, Rakshastal feels restless and unsettled. The water is salty instead of fresh, and even on calm days, the surface moves around like there's a storm inside it. Travellers often mention how the air around it feels heavy, even strange. Just standing there gives some people an uneasy feeling they can't explain. Pilgrims interpret these two lakes as perfect reflections of Lord Shiva's dual nature. On one hand, the peaceful yogi is in meditation. On the other hand, the destroyer whose energy can shake the cosmos. What makes it more puzzling is the little river that links them together. It's called Ganga Chu, and legend says ancient sages created it so that the pure water from Mansarovar could flow into Rakshastal. But even with that constant stream of fresh water pouring in, Rakshastal never loses its saltiness. It refuses to be changed. The strangeness doesn't stop with the water. Pilgrims who camp by Mansarovar have said they've seen dots of light flicker across the surface at night. Nobody has been able to explain them. Some say it's reflections of stars, but the way they move makes it feel like something else entirely. And the colour of the lake itself doesn't like to stay put. Some days it looks deep blue, the next it shifts into green, and sometimes it even glows with reddish tones. Scientists point to minerals, algae, or tricks of the light, but for people who make the journey, it only deepens the sense that the lake is alive in its own way. And then there are the disappearing acts. Stories have spread of the lake, or parts of the shoreline seeming to vanish and reappear. Paths along the sacred Kora route are said to do the same. Pilgrims describe walking along a trail only to find that it suddenly fades into nothing, and later it shows up again in another spot. For a first-time visitor, it can feel like the land itself is playing tricks, making you doubt your sense of direction. Also, when the sun begins to set, shadows crawl across the southern slopes, and for a short time, something remarkable happens. Light and shadow come together to form the shape of a giant swastika, its arms stretching across the snow and rock. For those who don't know, the swastika is an ancient symbol in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. It means well-being, good fortune, and sacred power. Yep, I get that the symbol has a different reputation today, but in this context, it stood for luck and strength. In the old Burn religion of Tibet, Mount Kailash was even called the 9-story swastika mountain. Observers say the slopes hide other symbols too. Some climbers and researchers claim that when you study satellite images or clear photos of the southern face, you can make out what looks like a giant human face carved into the rock. The shape is uncanny, with clear outlines of eyes, a nose, lips, and even a forehead. Devotees see this as the face of Lord Shiva himself, forever watching over his sacred home. The face is already hard to explain, sure, but what if the mountain's perfect symmetry is pointing to something even stranger? It's one thing to say Mount Kailash is a hard mountain to climb. It's another to hear people argue it might not even be a mountain at all. That's where the pyramid hypothesis comes in. Instead of seeing a giant peak carved by wind and ice over millions of years, some claim we're looking at the biggest pyramid ever built. Russian researchers, especially Dr. Ernst Muldashev, have pushed this theory for years. He and his team even suggested that Kailash might be the center of a huge pyramid complex. According to them, it's not just one pyramid sitting alone in Tibet, but a whole cluster of over 100 smaller pyramidal structures surrounding it. If those numbers hold up, the main structure could stand anywhere from 100 meters to a staggering 1,800 meters in direct height. For comparison, the Great Pyramid of Giza is only about 146 meters. That's like stacking Giza on top of itself more than 10 times, and still not reaching the estimated upper size of Kailash. Supporters of this idea point to the mountain's shape. They say it's just too neat, too sharp, and too symmetrical to be an accident of nature. Mount Kailash has 4 sides that line up almost perfectly with the 4 main compass directions: north, south, east, and west. That's rare for any mountain shaped purely by tectonic forces. One early explorer remarks that the horizontal layers and perfectly perpendicular faces make it look as though giant hands had built it block by block. Another detail that catches people's attention is how the stepped formation seems to hold up far better against erosion than other peaks in the Himalayas. In a region known for earthquakes and harsh weather, you'd expect a natural formation to be far more worn down by now. That too feeds the idea of a man-made structure. A few researchers go even further, linking Kailash to a network of ancient sites around the world. They point out that the mountain sits exactly 6,666 kilometers from Stonehenge and the North Pole, and double that from the South Pole. It also lines up with places like Easter Island, Machu Picchu, and the pyramids of Giza. According to this theory, ancient builders might have mapped an invisible grid across the planet, using Kailash as one of its main points. And if the idea of Mount Kailash being a pyramid already feels wild, the next theory takes it even further. Some argue the mountain wasn't built by people at all, but by beings who weren't even from Earth. According to this line of thought, Kailash isn't just a mountain that happens to look geometric. It's a relic, something left behind by an advanced intelligence that may have shaped or even used it for reasons we still don't understand. What grabs people first is the shape. Some say the symmetry is way too sharp to be natural, but they also don't think humans carved it. In their view, Kailash isn't just a mountain or a man-made monument. It's something different altogether. If that's true, then Kailash might not be a pile of rock formed over millions of years, but more like a massive structure, carefully engineered to serve a purpose. Some believe the mountain wasn't meant as a temple or monument, but as a piece of technology. They talk about it like an ancient power plant, something capable of producing energy on a scale we can't even imagine today. There's even a fringe idea that this hidden power could have triggered disasters in ancient times, including the destruction of Mohenjo-Daro, which some researchers claim shows signs of a nuclear-like event. To believers, the strange electromagnetic waves and time distortions reported near Kailash aren't accidents of geology, but side effects of that long-lost technology. The story doesn't stop there. In Hindu tradition, Kailash is linked to flying machines called vimanas, vehicles of the gods that could soar across the skies. Ancient alien supporters latch onto this and suggest those stories might not be metaphors at all. but actual memories of advanced craft seen by early humans. Tibetan traditions add another layer. They speak of Shambhala and Agartha, hidden cities said to exist within or beneath the Kailash range. These places are described as homes to immortals, sages, or enlightened beings who live outside ordinary time. Some even say they operate in another dimension that only the spiritually awakened can access. If you tilt the perspective just a little, those descriptions start to sound like tales of another civilization altogether, maybe even one not of this earth. One spiritual leader even suggested that beings spotted near Lake Manasarova were unlike any known form of life, going as far as to hint that Shiva himself may not have been from this world. And then there are the sightings. People who've been up there talk about lights in the sky that don't look like stars at all. Some say they've seen glowing orbs that move like they know where they're going. Others swear the lights dive straight into Lake Manasarova and then shoot back out again. And a few even claim they've seen beings, figures that didn't look fully human, just dark shapes slipping through the night and then gone like they were never there. The mystery doesn't stop with what people see. It goes back to the idea of what Kailash stands for. According to this belief, Kailash is the world's center point, the very spot that ties earth and sky together. In other words, it's the axis of the universe itself. People sometimes call it the world pillar, the navel of the earth, or the cosmic center. The way the story goes, Kailash isn't just a mountain reaching up into the sky, it's seen as the one place where everything meets. Heaven, earth, and even what's beneath us are all said to connect right there. And when you hear that, you start to see why so many cultures treat this peak as more than just a pile of rock. It rises 6,638 meters into the air, but in these traditions, its height is less about numbers and more about meaning. It's the pole around which everything spins. This idea shows up again and again in ancient myths. In Hindu and Buddhist stories, there's a sacred mountain called Mount Meru. It's not just a mountain, but the very center of the universe, holding everything in balance. Followers of these traditions believe Kailash is the physical form of that cosmic Meru. Some modern thinkers have tried to match that ancient belief with more esoteric ideas. They call Kailash the crown chakra of the planet. If you've ever heard of chakras in yoga or meditation, you'll know the crown chakra is the very top point, the one that connects you to higher consciousness. So by that logic, Kailash is like Earth's head, the place where the planet itself connects to something greater. One reason this theory sticks with people is geography. The mountain has 4 distinct faces, and each one lines up almost perfectly with north, south, east, and west. That's not something you see often in natural peaks. And then there's the rivers. 4 of Asia's greatest rivers start from the area around Kailash. Each one runs off in a different direction, almost as if the mountain is feeding the world. Now, this isn't only about maps and rivers. For people who travel there, it's about what they feel. Pilgrims say that when they walk near Kailash, they sense an energy unlike anything else. Some describe it as vibrations. Others talk about a deep calm that makes meditation stronger. There are even claims that being in the region helps speed up spiritual progress, like the mountain itself gives you a push. What stands out to me is how this belief also explains the rule that no one is allowed to climb Kailash. It's not about how dangerous the slopes are, though they're nearly impossible anyway. It's about respect. For pilgrims, it's not just a mountain, it's the center of the universe. They believe that stepping on the summit would mess up the balance of the world and break its sacred connection. That's why, even though people climb other big mountains in the Himalayas, no one climbs Kailash. It's left alone, standing as the world's special center. It's one thing to call Kailash the center of the world, but a lot of stories go much further than that. Earlier I mentioned Shambhala and Agartha in passing, and this is where they really come in. Legends say entire hidden worlds could exist beneath the mountain, sealed off from ordinary people. These secret realms are said to hold great wisdom, endless riches, or even civilizations that chose to live out of sight from the rest of us. The one that comes up most often is Shambhala. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, this isn't just some lost city. It's described as a perfect kingdom, a place where enlightened beings live in peace and harmony. According to the Kala Chakra text, which are some of the most mysterious writings in Buddhism, Shambhala holds special teachings meant to guide humanity when the world falls into chaos. The catch is that only the spiritually worthy can ever find it. For everyone else, the door stays closed. The idea is that Shambhala isn't exactly on the same timeline as us. It exists in another dimension, which is why seekers who go out looking often end up seeing visions or feeling like the land is hidden right behind a veil. Some texts even line up its location with the latitude of Mount Kailash, as if the mountain is not just a mountain, but a secret gateway. If the name Shambhala sounds familiar, it might be because of the Western spin on it. The word Shangri-La, from the book Lost Horizon, was inspired by these same legends. That fictional paradise tucked in a Tibetan valley caught people's imagination. But for locals around Kailash, Shambhala is no fairy tale. It's woven into their spiritual life. But Shambhala isn't the only legend tied to the mountain. There's also talk of Agartha, an underground kingdom said to stretch beneath Kailash and across other hidden spots on Earth. Agartha is imagined as a vast network of tunnels and cities where advanced beings live, holding knowledge and technology beyond anything we know. Some accounts say they came from the Gobi Desert or deep inside the Himalayas. Others push it even further, claiming these civilizations aren't human at all but closer to gods, or even visitors from elsewhere in the universe. If some people believe whole civilizations live under Kailash, what do they think is waiting above it? Across 4 major religions, Kailash isn't just a pile of stone and snow. It's seen as a kind of stairway, not the kind you climb with your boots, but one that connects Earth straight to the divine. It's the same idea you find in other traditions too, like Jacob's ladder in the Bible, a bridge connecting heaven and earth. For Hindus, Kailash is home itself for Lord Shiva. He's the god of destruction and renewal, often shown meditating in calm stillness. And many believe he's seated right there on the summit with his wife Parvati and their children, Ganesha and Kartikeya. To them, Kailash isn't just a holy spot, it's literally Shiva's address on earth. What makes the story even more gripping is the southern face of Kailash. The lines and ridges cut into it look like giant steps. With melting snow making those lines even clearer, many have called it the Stairway to Heaven. Hindu texts like the Mahabharata even say the Pandava brothers tried to walk that path to the top to reach heaven itself. All of them failed except Yudhishthira, the eldest, who made it with his loyal dog. And that dog, some say, wasn't a dog at all but a god in disguise. For millions of Hindus, the way to honour the mountain isn't by climbing it but by circling it. The ritual is called Kailash Yatra, or Kailash Parikrama. One full circle around Kailash is said to erase the sins of an entire lifetime, and if you somehow manage 108 circles, you're free from the cycle of rebirth forever. Buddhists also see Kailash as more than just a mountain. They call it Kangrin Pochi, the precious snow mountain. The mountain is tied to Demchok, a deity who represents bliss and the ultimate form of enlightenment. Some say the mountain itself is like the body of Buddha standing on earth. There's even a famous story about Milarepa, a legendary Tibetan yogi. He's said to have reached the summit, but not in any way we'd understand. The story goes that he flew up on a beam of sunlight, touched the peak, and then told everyone else to leave it alone. Since then, climbing Kailash has been seen as off-limits. After hearing about yogis flying on sunlight and stairways to heaven, you've got to wonder what scientists make of all this. Geologists look at Kailash and don't see stairways to heaven or massive pyramids. What they see is a mountain shaped by glaciers, wind and rain over millions of years. Nature works slowly, but all that constant pressure can carve out sharp edges. And sometimes those edges just happen to line up in ways that look intentional. That's what scientists think is going on here. To some, the symmetry feels almost too perfect, like someone measured it out. But in geology, neat shapes can appear by accident when erosion chips away from every side. Mount Kailash does have that sharp peak that feels almost too perfect, but it's not alone. Other mountains like the Matterhorn in Switzerland or Alpamayo in Peru also form pyramid-like shapes. Scientists call these pyramidal peaks, and they form when glaciers carve into the rock from 3 or more directions. Imagine ice scooping out giant valleys around a mountain. What's left standing in the middle looks like a pyramid. Nature's version of sculpting. Those cracks and symbols on the faces of the mountain, like the swastika shape people talk about, geologists say that's just rock layers breaking apart in straight lines. Rocks split along weak spots called strata. When sunlight hits them just right, shadows can form patterns that look meaningful. It's kind of like seeing shapes in clouds. You spot a dragon or a face, but it's really just water vapor. With Kailash, it's light and rock playing tricks on us. Some skeptics even point out that the perfect shape of Kailash is less perfect the closer you get. From a distance, it looks like geometry at work, but when climbers have gone partway up, they describe rough, uneven surfaces like any other mountain. So yeah, from the geology perspective, Mount Kailash isn't breaking the laws of physics, it's following them. To scientists, the mountain isn't a mystery machine or a giant temple. It's just Earth being really, really good at making things look cooler than they actually are. So, after hearing how geologists see Kailash as just a mountain doing mountain things, let's shift to something that honestly sounds even stranger. The story of those Siberian climbers who supposedly aged years in a single day. I mean, that tale grabs you right away. Young guys climb a mountain, and by the time they come back down, their hair is white, their nails are long, and within a year, they're all dead of old age. It sounds terrifying, no doubt. But doctors and medical experts who've looked at that story aren't convinced. From their perspective, the human body just doesn't work that way. Rapid aging isn't something you can switch on like a light. What could explain it instead? Well, for one, altitude sickness. When you're climbing at high elevations, the oxygen level drops fast. Your body panics, your heart races, you get dizzy, and in some cases your skin and hair can change appearance because your body is under so much stress. To an untrained eye, someone gasping and pale might look decades older in just a few hours. Critics point to the power of perception. They argue that when people already expect something unusual, the mind can exaggerate what's really there. Combined with exhaustion, hunger, and fear, a group might convince itself that it's aging in real time. From this view, nothing supernatural happened. It was stress and suggestion shaping how they saw things. The part about them dying later could also have a simpler explanation. Extreme climbs put huge strain on the heart and lungs. Many high-altitude climbers develop hidden damage that shows up months or years later. Historians often bring up the idea of cultural memory to explain why stories like this last. They say it's about how communities remember and retell events, often turning ordinary struggles into dramatic legends. In this view, a failed climb isn't recalled as altitude sickness, but retold as the mountain aged them to death. Over time, the story becomes larger, darker, and harder to forget. With Mount Kailash, people already see it as holy and untouchable. So when climbers vanish or get sick, the memory transforms into proof that the mountain is rejecting humans. Over generations, these retellings solidify, and soon you've got a cultural belief that no one can ever conquer Kailash. If doctors focus on the body and historians focus on memory, psychologists are all about the mind. They ask, what if the real barrier at Mount Kailash isn't the snow or the height, but the way our brains react when we step onto it? Climbers already know altitude can mess with your head. At higher elevations, the air is so thin that your brain doesn't get enough oxygen. That shortage can spark all kinds of strange effects. Some people get headaches and dizziness, while others experience full-blown hallucinations. Imagine gasping for air, your chest burning, and suddenly seeing shapes in the snow or hearing whispers in the wind. To a climber already on edge, that would feel like the mountain itself pushing back. Fear adds another layer. Mountains can be intimidating at the best of times, but Kailash carries this heavy reputation. Everyone who approaches it already knows the stories, from curses to vanished climbers. Psychologists say that kind of expectation sets the stage for suggestion. If you're told a place is impossible to conquer, your body and mind may start proving it true. You feel weaker than usual, you lose your confidence, and before long, you're turning back without even realizing you've talked yourself out of it. There's also something researchers call decision fatigue. A climber who's been pushing for hours, running low on food, shivering in the cold, and battling exhaustion is already at their limit. When a storm suddenly rolls in, or the trail gets buried under fresh snow, the brain doesn't calmly weigh options. It shuts down. What looks like the mountain forcing someone to turn back is really their own survival instinct taking over. The critics give us plenty to chew on. They've got the science, the history, the psychology. And yeah, on paper it all makes sense. Rocks erode into neat shapes. Bodies give out in thin air. Brains get weird when fear takes over. But here's the thing, even after you hear all that, the mountain still doesn't feel ordinary. Every answer just seems to spark another question. The peak is still untouched. The shape still feels too perfect. And the mountain's wrapped in more stories than you can count. So sure, you can nod along with the logic, but deep down, it still feels like Kailash is holding on to something we're not meant to explain.